gentlemen, the Warbosses of Da ApORKalypse.
Greetings, boys and gits. Hey, guys. Don't forget to drill your barrels. I've nicked everybody's catchphrases. Hello, and welcome to the Warbosses of Da ApORKalypse. And
copyright infringement.
Yeah. Eat it. You can't stop me. Well, you can, but you know, you
silence him immediately.
This week we're going to talk about law, which is why I'm hosting again, because this is about the only time they would ever trust me with it. Probably because I'm going to do quite a lot of the talking, but I'm not alone on this podcast. It's a shame, really, but
fix your camera.
There are other people.
Just fucking fix your camera. We can see half your fucking head. I'm not going to go into this for 2 fucking hours. All right?
You're going all stealthy on us there, Dim.
Down a bit more.
I'm
down.
Listen, guys, don't worry. What he lacks in hosting skills,
Right.
It more than makes up for with law knowledge.
Now
He's
you're
gonna be
fucking-
fine, trust me.
So I've got to
There you
do that again, then, don't I?
Yes, there you go. See?
I've got to do this again, don't I? No.
By the way, the other two cunts didn't say
we're
fucking
going.
shit.
This is it. We're off. We're off to the races. You imagine, we're on. This is it. This is the show. All right.
I'm Dread, by the way. Hello.
I'm Steve-O. Hi.
Hello, I'm Scare. How is?
And that's
What a
Dim,
great start.
wherever he is.
We will
friend.
be the we'll be the backing singers for Dim on this episode.
So this week,
We're here for moral support, mostly.
yeah,
Got this, Dim.
Certainly
Got this.
feels like I've got moral support. It really does. It's so convincing.
I'm gonna do some painting through this one.
Wow, that's a great idea. Hobby.
This week, we're going to talk about resonance or Waaagh Energy. We're going to talk about the psychic phenomena that permeates all of Orkdom and that most people mostly only know about through Red Ones Go Faster and the mighty call of the Waaagh and the power of the Waaagh. We're going to try and explain this and tell you why an awful lot of people who talk about this are wrong.
Gets misunderstood a lot, doesn't it?
It's very, very
Misinterpreted
misunderstood, and yeah, it's very misunderstood and misattributed. Most commonly in the phraseology that I'm going to rail against later in the episode, which is that orc weapons only work because orcs think they do, which is not fully correct. But we'll get to that later on. So, where should we start?
Well,
Yeah, Steve-O.
yeah. So there's psychic resonance. So there's this
Stand up, please.
the whole thing about it is like yeah, like you say, if orcs believe red ones go faster, so they paint their vehicles red, and it actually works. Red ones do go faster. And there's a lot of belief with the orcs in with certain colours, like yellow makes louder bangs, bigger explosions. Purple is kind of the stealthy colour, and yeah, there's a lot of their belief in things, and they believe certain things. And when you get orcs in mass numbers, the psychic resonance kind of amplifies that, and it kind of makes that a reality. But I think where a lot of the misconception comes from with a lot of the community is that orcs aren't really aware of this on a sort of a conscious level. It's kind of like a subconscious thing. It's kind of designed into them, built into them. But they don't really have a control over it as such. It's not like an orc can say, listen, I want this to happen, so I will believe it with every ounce of my being, and then it will happen. They don't really stop and think about anything to any great degree. They're just kind of instinctual creatures.
I
and they do what they do.
I think to a believer in it happening, it's actually uncanny, the parallels between that and the human being, you know, because some people believe we have that ability, and some tests have been done before with, you know, TV programs and everybody thinking one thing at a time and making stuff happen. You know, some people really do believe in that.
Untapped
So it's interesting.
of the human mind.
Yeah. It's interesting that
it's
it's
how the
slide that in.
placebo effect works. That's how the placebo effect works.
Mm-hmm.
And they've tested it, and all sorts of things can work as a placebo effect, including religion, of all things.
Good Lord.
Well, yeah,
Stay on target! We've only just started this episode, man. Let's apply the fucking brakes.
anything that makes you calm. Anything that makes you calm. Because a lot of human pain, particularly, is linked to anxiety. So, if you alleviate anxiety in any way, you'll feel better. It's part of why if you just go to the doctors, if you go to the doctor, you are alleviated some of the symptoms, and the veracity of the placebo effect can vary entirely on what level of non-entity of treatment you've been given. So
some would argue that a lot of herbal remedies and homeopathic remedies are just placebo, and just taking it makes you believe that you're getting stronger.
They are placebos, but
this is the same thing as we're talking about with the orcs, though, isn't it? It's like it's red, it goes faster, and for that reason they put their foot down that little bit harder, because they really do think that if they do, it will go that bit faster, and it probably does because they're pushing it.
They it's amplified, isn't it, by the amount of orcs.
I think
this is
in discussing this, that you don't want to. Well, I don't personally want to fall onto either side. I'm sort of on the fence. I don't want to say it is a magic thing that actually does happen. If more of them believe it actually happens, because there is evidence of that. But then there's also evidence that you could say and argue it scientifically. So I think it's deliberately like that. It's deliberately blurred, and that's the way we like orc lore. So we don't want to decide it's one thing or the other particularly.
See,
it's quite often referred to within codexes and books and whatnot, isn't it? From a sort of imperial perspective of doing
we're not getting to that this week.
Capturing live specimens, or doing the autopsies and the research and sort of inquisitor findings and things. So
did you mention the Lord and Savior xenology? To have upside down. Which is exactly there is one orc that is trapped and then dissected. Yes, there's the word, along with a bunch of other races. Unfortunately, it features the Deceiver, so this is probably all completely ruined by someone writing about changing the way that Necron lore works. No idea who that was, though.
Might as well get one in there.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I couldn't resist. But yeah, actually, as I'm showing you this, I should probably tell you, if you want to read more about resonance and stuff, I'd probably say there's 3 key things that you need to read. So we've got xenology, which covers a few bits, and it dissects literally some of what is said in these 2 books. So this is the Gorkamorka River book, and this is the 3rd edition Orc Codex.
I take it sporing is on the cards if you're talking Torden and Gorkamorka.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go into sporing too much, because that will probably be a really good video to do, and down the line is another video on sporing specifically.
Save that one for later.
But the sporing and resonance stuff gets more or less codified in Gorkamorka and 3rd Ed, which were obviously developed around about the same time. They're both written by Andy Chambers. And quite the Anzion articles are the main sources of information on this. This one is only in the Orc Codex, and this talks about the mechamorphic resonance, which is the thing we're going to get into, which is the red ones go faster bit, which isn't really covered in Gorkamorka, because Gorkamorka really presses the reset button pretty hard on the basis of Orcs quite a lot, probably to make it feel very distinctly Mad Max without adding the Orc flavor. But most of the main laws in there, and there's the sporing article that's in this one that does mention Waaagh Energy a bit and resonance is a lot longer in the other book, and it's
a lot more in depth, if I remember correctly, than the Tordard version.
They cut bits out. There's a bit missing from this is the 30-year lifespan of like thinking that orcs have a 30-year lifespan. I'm not convinced by this idea that orcs have this 30-year lifespan. And even then, if you read it and you read it very, very carefully, it's like most orcs have about a 30-year lifespan, but it just seems to be, it's just an average. It's not a hard reset. It's not like orcs get to 30 and they die. And the reason I can say this with some confidence is if you look at any kind of timeline, Gaz should be long dead. Gaz should be long dead before the third war for Armageddon. Never mind the fact that he's still running around. Granted, he's now zombie Gaz.
Most characters, to be fair.
Or Yarrick. Yarrick should be long dead as well. Like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll not get into the new timeline because that's you know.
What timeline? Sure, time's shattered now, and is relative to each sector. Yeah, fucking.
Look, can we just
hashtag triggered?
Right, as my headcanon fact, right, is that Orc Law, like 40k Law, just stopped in the mid-noughties, just before Matt Ward got hired. And just like that is
there we
where
go.
it's based.
I expect like the Liege Matt Ward.
Yeah, but the thing is he came along and now we have an actual Liege. So like, anyway, hello.
So Weird Boys. Weird Boys aren't. We're talking psychic resonance and psychic powers, and Weird Boys aren't psychers in the traditional sense, are they? Like, with,
well, they are. They are traditional psychers, but they work in a different way.
Yeah. So
I know what he just said.
Yes, it was what I just said. They
Well,
act more like
They are psychers.
more like listen, motherfucker, you said you're going to let us speak first, and then you're going to go deep diving, all right? So they act more like a conduit for the orcs around them, don't they? They're kind of like a vessel that they this psychic energy where they kind of almost like, for want of a better terminology, words, things, they kind of absorb all the psychic resonance from the orcs around them, and it kind of just it fills them up to like almost like a pressure cooker till it explodes out in some random psychic power way. And this can be either from firing green plasma energy from their gobs and eyeballs to teleporting a unit of tank busters across the table.
So a weird boy is a bit like a psychiatrist who's just a bit sensitive to the issues of the boys.
Yeah, I suppose one kind of odd analogy. Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, they kind of again in a way that the orcs don't have much sort of kind of conscious power over their own psychic powers, because I suppose in a way they're all effectively kind of, without knowing it, psychers. They have huge psychic powers that they're kind of just completely unaware of, almost too stupid to hold conscious power. If an orc was intelligent enough to sort of have the knowledge of that power, it could be an incredibly
They're a bit like they're a bit like one of them. They're a bit like one of them cookie jars that's like a moo cow or something like that. And you lift it up and it makes a noise, but you don't know what you're going to find inside. It's always a surprise.
These analogies are so fucking weird.
I used to have a Cookie Monster one. It was awesome.
So Weird Boys, they kind of again have very almost little power over what's going to come out of them. And what they're going to do. It's incredibly random, to which the orcs take great delight in. It can be very entertaining to watch their mates' heads explode and stuff when shit goes wrong.
Orcs enjoy the unpredictable, because they embrace it fully. We'll get into this a bit more. I'm not going to.
I wonder if with the resonance, whether it's the orc boys, what the majority of them are thinking they wish would happen, that happens psychically through the cycle, or whether it's just a random bunch of green energy that just manifests however, or whether it's actually what they were thinking. Like, wouldn't it be cool if Gorks stomped right on the enemy right now. Wouldn't that be really cool? If loads of them are thinking that, and they was like, yeah, that'd be fucking brilliant, wouldn't it? Yeah, and they're all joking about it. If then the psychic energy goes to the psyker, and that very thing
probably is a bit of that. It probably is a bit of both. Complete randomness, or kind of like a belief or a want for something to happen.
Well done, Dread, for getting to the gist of what this entire discussion is going to be about. Is exactly it right there. Because we'll talk about this in depth at some point, but the key to understanding resonance is understanding the average orc, because that very much lays the basis of what resonance can and can't do.
To understand the deep complexities of the inner workings of the mind of an orc.
Or lack thereof.
I think there's probably a lot of confusion on the matter, though, because we haven't had like a defined narrative throughout the history of Warhammer 40k for orcs. Like, they've changed quite a bit. If you look at them from Rogue Trader, some, the characters of what the race was, then second edition, then the third edition, like, they totally kind of changed their vision of what they wanted 40k orcs to be. I think a lot of that sort of feeds into why we end up having this kind of discussion of what exactly, what's going on. And I think as we're going through this, and people who are either watching or listening as well, like, we're not defining it for you. You know what I mean? Like, I find it depending on what time in the hobby you start, orcs will mean something different to you. Mm-hmm. If you start in second edition, it's going to be different to like somebody who's fresh in the hobby now. Like, orcs will, like, I find that with a lot of orc players as well, and orc veteran players, that you'll find that whatever period of time, because what orcs are and how they've been defined in 40k has changed so much over the years. Depending on what time frame, different people are going to have different points of view, and I really like that. Actually, I like that orcs aren't one specific defined thing.
To be fair, also there are some young ones that come in and have a particular love for like the retro look and go for like, second ed look in orcs,
Well, yeah, visually, but I'm talking. I was talking about lore, but yeah, even visually as well. You've seen the aesthetic change, so that all ties together, and that's how we end up with interesting topics of conversation like this. Like what?
Yeah, I came
the change.
Gorkamorka stage, so for me it's like all sort of third ed onwards, and
visually and so lore-wise, from first and second to third is the big sort of transition period, isn't it? Where their lore, their look, a lot changed about them in that transition from second to third ed.
But I think Dim hit a key point there, and I think a lot of people don't realize how much Gorkamorka, how much of an effect it had on the vision of what 40k orcs are and what they became. So if you're into orcs and you're new to orcs, if you're new into the faction, I suggest you go and read the Gorkamorka books if you can get your hands on them. There are PDFs out there. In the early 2000s, Games Workshop gave out free PDFs. There's the Tugs website, Dim, is it?
The Unnamed Gorkamorka site, which I think is Tugs. It's a small T but UGS. But if we remember on link in description, we'll be there.
Yeah, we'll add links.
Our mutual friend Ben is responsible for Tugs, and he's forgotten more about what Gorkamorka than what pretty much anyone else on the planet knows.
What's
very, very good source for all that stuff.
What's a lot of the ways in, we've kind of touched on it briefly, but what's a lot of the ways that you see on forums and things where people are misinterpreting like orc psychic powers, psychic resonance, and the way it works, and sort of the common power orcs have over? I know we've touched on it briefly, like a lot of people sort of almost mistakenly kind of see it as the orcs have some kind of control over this, a conscious control, and almost like they can just wish things into being, which they do have the potential to,
you might see people say, why can't they just if they can do that, then why don't they just think themselves a big this or a massive, it's like, it doesn't quite work like that.
The kind of sorry, Dim, I know you're about to talk about almost like the might makes right, the war bosses fighting and the knobs, the infighting amongst themselves. There's a lot of that self-belief. You know, I'm biggest, I'm best, I should be in charge. It's going to give them some kind of edge in battle, and as they win fights and stuff, that then reinforces their self-belief. They get bigger, the stronger and stuff. But it's not a lowly orc youth can't just go, I'm going to be the biggest and best because I want to be, and he's just going to grow overnight to warboss size and then dominate the tribe. It's kind of
well, he can actually, but it's unlikely. It's very unlikely.
I think you're saying, Steve, that one of the ingredients of the orc energy is ego.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Is it though? Because there's a thing, right? Is like, because orcs don't really have problems like that. Not really. They're not, because ego is almost like a feeling of insecurity, and orcs don't have insecurity. Orcs just
they have a self-belief, and they have an orc beaten down. Challenges for leadership and is beaten down by his opponent is going to understand on a basic level he's bigger than me.
Well, belief then, outright belief.
Yeah, outright
personal belief.
Like a Donald Trump style self-belief. I knew that would trigger Scar. I did it on purpose.
Right.
I'm redeeming this episode, so Jesus Christ.
I'm going to go and play Tau. Fuck this.
Okay. Oh. So this is why I just have grots. So right, okay. So the common sort of meme, seeing as Steve-O decided to ask a question and then continue talking, is that orc technology and orcs themselves, orcs are stupid because their technology works only because they think it does, which isn't true. And I suppose now's as good a time as any to start picking that apart a little bit, just to give us a basis. So a few things to get us started. So Waaagh Energy is just psychic energy. Why it's called Waaagh Energy is because orcs have some kind of unique ability to tap onto each other's psychic energy to an extent. Although I don't know if more orcs around creates a greater intensity of everything, but I do think that Waaagh Energy contributes quite a lot to certain things. Now, there's a scientific name for all parts of orcdom. So squigs, snortlings, Gretchen, and orcs is called orcoids. It's mentioned quite a lot in the scientific sort of documents that you find in various books, particularly Xenology and the Orc Codex from third edition. And bits of that study was included in the 4th edition one. Since then, GW is reticent to include it. And I'll just cover that briefly. Honestly, don't care what GW thinks about the lore. As far as I'm concerned, I'm an orc player. I own all the orc books. I kind of feel duty bound to say what happened throughout all of the editions. And I use that information to inform other orc players of what is out there. They can make up their own mind about what the lore is. I don't give a damn that GW's like, well, actually, there's no truth. Don't give a damn about that. Us orc players have to understand our faction, the same as any other players in any other faction. And orcs are the most badly treated in this respect. We've got an awful lot of information, a lot of it scraps, and we've got to build something from it. The useful thing about resonance is resonance hasn't really changed in all that time. Like the red ones go faster thing is in Rogue Trader. It's there. There just seemed to be an implication though. Like it wasn't clearly spelt out how it worked. We knew it was something to do with the psychic powers and psychic idea. Although really in Rogue Trader, we're talking about the early days when I don't think even Rick Priestley knew what psychic stuff was going to turn out to be. Orcs have changed a lot, but in many ways they haven't changed, and I think this is one of the things that always...
Some key components have stayed the same.
One of the things that irritates me is people go, oh, well, orcs are completely different, you know, when you get to 3rd edition. It's like, it's not true. There's an awful lot that's common, and that's why, actually, if you look at the more recent versions of orcs, an awful lot of ideas and concepts are coming back from those Rogue Trader days, and they're starting to get mentioned again, because it still fits. Almost everything about orcs, other than I would say the wild ones fluff, the reproduction stuff to do with how orcs reproduce, where grots come from, and stuff like that, has changed. Their origins has also changed as well. They've been tied to the Necrons and the Old Ones and the Necrontyr and that shit show, and that's changed. But the nature of what an orc is more or less the same. The average boy is a very unimaginative and unambitious orc that exists for the kind of pleasure that it wants to pursue, which is normally fighting. They live within a society. Orcs are very culturally minded. They think about their culture in a lot of ways. It permeates into their identity. That's where culture comes from. The idea of culture with a K and no E on the end, like, is a big part of orcdom. When orcs are in a society, they're thinking about culture all of the time. They make music. They do all sorts of stuff. They appreciate all sorts of aspects. They even make fun fairs from time to time. They're called razzes. So, like, there's a lot of orcs spend an awful lot of time thinking about identity, and there's definitely some resonant stuff going on there. So we talked about colors earlier. The purple thing and the yellow thing is to some extent fan fluff, because GW's never talked about purple or yellow in sort of core stuff. As far as I'm aware, it's not being mentioned, but it perfectly fits with the logic. It perfectly fits, and it would work because of the way that resonance does work. Resonance is based on kind of like sort of folk belief, and the one thing I want to emphasize before we go any further is that orcs aren't stupid, but they are very, very straightforward. How I like to describe this is that they're rationally irrational. So, like, orcs only go by what they see. They're very straightforward in their thinking. You could almost say that orcs are the working class of the 40k universe. Like, they are just very straightforward beings who...
That comment isn't loaded at all, like...
common sense, permeates.
Oh, no, you didn't!
Frickin' well did, me laddie-o. And, but in a sense, it's all about, like, having a straightforward attitude to a thing. But where they deviate from us to an extent, although the more time goes on, I'm starting to think orcs are smarter than us. They have this element where
they're more successful than us.
They look at a problem. Well, yeah. They look at a problem and they kind of come up with solutions that, like, most other people would say, that's balmy. But to the orc mindset, it makes perfect sense. So let's look at Red Ones Go Faster.
This sounds like a middle-class man trying to say what's good about the working class right now.
I'm working class, I'll have you freaking know. Don't make me turn up my northern accent. Anyway,
they're not that bad, dear. Just don't look them in the eye.
I live in an old pit town. Don't use the MC words. Anyway, oh god, everybody other than the Brits is not going to have a clue what's going on with this.
No, yeah, true.
What's that I can hear? It's a subscriber count going down. Oh, I was wondering what was causing that.
We might be reaching India. You never know.
Yeah. So orcs are rationally irrational. So if we take Red Ones Go Faster, for instance, right? The example it mentions in the Codex is that the belief probably comes from the fact that two vehicles that on the face of it seemed identical to the orcs that viewed the race. What the only difference between both of them, the only perceptible difference, was that one was red and one wasn't. So to an orc, well, red ones obviously go faster, because of course they do. We've seen it. And that is where that belief has most likely come from. And because it enters the orc subconscious as a folk understanding, resonance twists reality a little bit and makes it true. Another example of this is bad moons.
Like humans with
bad moon
news and stuff, isn't it? Oh. You say something enough,
I tried.
It kind of becomes true, doesn't it?
I tried.
You can. Well,
if someone says
I'm just
Here,
drawing
look,
on
here's
the
one.
comparisons, you know.
Here's a great one for you. If someone says, "Here, look, there's chemical chemtrails in the skies," everyone looks at the skies and notices aeroplane trails more. You know, it's one of those things. It's like, you know, you point it
Well,
out, everyone
I've got
notices it.
alternative facts.
Why am I the only one who's trying to salvage this bleeding episode? This is
I'm
what's
trying
getting
to.
at me.
I'm trying to salvage it. It's like
He's just keeping quiet, self.
can't beat- you can't beat him,
I'm in.
join
I'm
him.
in.
so bad moons. Bad moons are believed to be the richest, and it's true because bad moons are the richest. Now, I think I mentioned this in a previous episode, but bad moons traditionally used to use a type of squig called a flesh eater. We'll talk about squigs probably at some point down the line. And those squigs have one particular trait that is very, very useful to particularly bad moons who notice this useful trait. Their teeth are basically the same as orc teeth, and orc teeth is the currency. So bad moons used to harvest these teeth. They'd particularly send Gretchen to do it, who obviously absolutely loved doing this job. And often some Gretchen wouldn't come back because flesh eaters are pretty vicious. And they would use these teeth, and obviously they would have a greater financial advantage amongst other orcs, which came to the idea that orcs started to think, hang on a minute, where are these teeth coming from? Well, obviously, bad moons must have teeth that grow quicker. And
Which means they roar louder.
Which
more money with guns that go louder.
Well, I don't know about the louder thing. I don't know if that's ever been mentioned, but certainly the bad moon's teeth.
I'm sure it has. I'm sure it was a white dwarf thing. Like, when you said that earlier, I was like, okay, the purple thing, yeah, maybe that's a sand thing. But I'm sure the yellow thing was like
possibly.
I'm sure.
I'm pretty sure I heard blue being lucky as well.
Well, blue is
blue lucky.
Blue is definitely lucky, and I think there's probably some connection to that, and also the fact that Death Skulls, for no particular reason, but they just do, they have more docks. I think there's probably an element to the old Death Skulls culture that is kind of like inherently morbid. So because it's inherently morbid, you get more mechs, you get more docks. And because you have more docks, you have an awful lot of orcs covering themselves in blue because they desperately do not want to go to the docks. And there's an awful lot of enterprising docks walking around looking for injuries to fix. So you'd think that if you were a Death Skull, you're probably thinking more about avoiding docks than most other orcs. So you'd probably be invested in the idea of some kind of war paint,
injuries, just waiting for a sleeping orc.
Yeah, it's true. It's true for television though, because there is a blue war paint that the Celts used to use that, because of the way that the dye was made, it is inherently antiseptic. So it's very useful against wounds, because if you were wounded on an area with blue paint, it would be protected from infection.
So with the psychic resonance as well, did orcs will Gorkamorka into being?
Well, in the same way that all warp gods are. All the warp gods are like that. The chaos gods are like that. The Emperor, if he is indeed a warp god at this point, is the same process. That's part of the reason why.
Yeah, we draw parallels between the real world and. Oh, sorry. No,
but
let's not go there.
But there's a reason why the Emperor wanted to outlaw religion. This is the reason why he wanted to get rid of it in the 40k universe, because any race that's inherently psychic can create gods in the warp. That's where the chaos gods come from. That's where Gorkamorka comes from. That's where the Eldar gods come from to some extent. Although obviously,
and is that possibly why he is a god and not a god at the same time? It's like, don't worship him as a god, but he kind of is a god.
Possibly.
Yeah.
It does explain an awful lot about we can learn a lot about the warp gods by orcs themselves, because the interesting thing about the power of the various gods is that they fluctuate because their believers are killed and because their believers doubt and various other things. Whereas Gorkamorka can wander around the warp beating up the other orc gods with impunity.
I don't want to touch on really
because
territory here.
Oh, God.
I heard, right? I read a book. It was called Pagan Resurrection. And it was about the idea of Odin and the old Germanic Norse gods, and how because Christianity came into Germany and blah blah, they were no longer believed in, so they weren't powerful, but they didn't disappear entirely, and that a revival in pagan interest and the occult by the Nazis was the repowering of Thorin or Odin. It was like giving power back to that god. It was an interesting perspective. I mean, I didn't believe it, but it's an interesting perspective, and it's the same sort of thing you're talking about with the Orcs.
Well,
again, with 40k and
gods.
all kind of works of fiction, they do have some kind of basis in reality and that stuff, don't they? So yeah, I think a lot of real world religions and things has some kind of input.
The idea of religion and belief and stuff like that, and resonant based belief, is kind of like a big thing. Just using another fictional example, in the Diablo computer game universe, all of the nasty things that you fight are based on the nightmares of the human that is hosted by Diablo in the first game, because he's possessed like Leoric's youngest son, and like his nightmares create the demons that Diablo himself uses. Because the idea is that the demons take shape on the basis of fears, and I don't know whether or not that's still canon within the universe, but that's a similar idea of a resonant based belief.
Do you think that the Orcs' belief in the Emperor as a god
that's being
goes
mentioned
a lot of way into powering him as well?
Very
because
possibly.
they have huge respect for the Emperor, don't they? They don't understand quite why the way the sort of the human military and stuff works, and why little people are in charge of people and stuff.
I wouldn't say that. Like, the Blood Axes do sort of emulate a lot of the tactical doctrine that they're exposed to from the Imperials. So I wouldn't say they don't
understand why like a weedy little commander is like in charge of like the troops, don't they? They kind of they question things like that. But they certainly have a lot of respect for the Emperor. And
that's probably his empowering him.
Worthy, and again,
in Rogue Trader,
even the loyalists, members of the Imperium, their belief or their knowledge, or at least understanding of Chaos God's existence, is probably also helping bolster their existence.
Well, that's part of the reason why the population of Armageddon was almost destroyed by the Inquisition. Because like the Imperium like to deny the existence of chaos as much as possible, and the only reason that the people of Armageddon were spared was because the Space Wolves were incensed by the idea that the people who had fought absolutely ridiculously hard to save their home from being destroyed were going to be killed because they knew that chaos existed in the first Armageddon War. And the Space Wolves intervened and said, yeah, you kill them, then we kill you. So they didn't. So the people of Armageddon know of chaos, but only because the Space Wolves protected them. The Imperium like to suppress that. It's mentioned in Rogue Trader. I don't know if it's been mentioned since, but in Rogue Trader, it does talk about Orc religion. It talks about a little bit about how the Orcs... Basically, the Orcs think that the Emperor is the human's god, so they do think that. Yeah.
So when you talk as well, I'm jumping from one thing to another, but in terms of like Orc technology, because you hear a lot of different things about this. You hear there's the sort of stuff of like Orc weapons being obtained by humans and being inoperable. Going to extremes of I've heard it mentioned of like cracking open like a slugger or a shooter and finding it like filled with rocks or something, which to me doesn't sit quite right. It kind of takes it to an extreme. And there's a lot of talk of like things like that, but although Orcs don't go to like a college to learn mechanics and stuff, it's bred into them. So the mechs and the mech boys and things, although they don't They couldn't sit there and write a textbook on how to do stuff. They just kind of instinctively know it, like a tiger instinctively knows to hunt. You know, creatures are born with this instinct, and it's much the same way as with like mechs. They have this just inherited instinct of how to build machinery, how to wire things up, and they really do a lot of this stuff with plans and things. So that kind of look. Now I don't know if GW have ever gone out and said as much in terms like that, but I've heard it on a lot of like sort of lore videos and things.
I'm pretty sure I've read it somewhere that it's like the genetics has been encoded that orcs are specifically engineered.
Yeah, that very much so. But
lore,
I mean, in terms of like the technology of finding like a shooter and it being inoperable in human hands and stuff, and that there's somehow the psychic resonance, and I guess there is an element of truth in that to a degree, but I think it's kind of almost taken too far.
I've got a quote here if you want.
Go on, go for it.
Skills, right. Within a short period, the Orkoid will have all of the characteristics of a full adult, including the facility of speech, as well as understanding fairly complex mechanics and automotive processes. Skills seem to be genetically engineered into Orkoids. Their physicians, scientists, and other specialists have their knowledge inherent in them. Think of the possibilities for training our own fighting forces if we could alter the genetic makeup so that they instinctively know how to strip and clean a weapon, fight in close melee, and have rudimentary knowledge of strategy and tactics. Even with the genetically engineered Adeptus Astartes, it makes almost 10 years of intensive therapy and physical alteration to affect what an orc knows instinctively, Bellator Natus. And Bellator Natus, or Bellator Natus, whichever way you want to say it, that just means warrior born or born warrior.
But has it ever been stated in like official law in terms of like technology and things not working in? No, not saying that. I mean, I'm talking about the technology side of things.
Yes, it has.
Yeah. But would you say though, like in terms of saying like strip open a weapon and it's filled with rocks is just kind of taking it to like
that's taking it to
extreme.
It's like people getting their lore from memes.
Yeah, it's like a loose, like maybe a slugger's got like some loose wiring or some bolts not quite fitted in, so it is inoperable. It needs fixing. But with the psychic resonance in the heat of battle, this thing still fires. You can kind of see that happening.
I think we need an analogy at this point, and I have a couple to use. I want to deal with this directly because I think this is the biggest problem. It's mentioned in the lore from time to time. And the word that always gets fucking forgotten is the word sometimes. Sometimes orc technology is taken away from orcs and it stops working. Sometimes. Right. Now, people extrapolate from that
because it would be poorly maintained and poorly looked after in
hands. Well, no. Like, want to re-emphasize, right? It mentions in the lore that orcs are born with the knowledge of how to strip and maintain their weapons. That's any orc. Any orc. It's not just the specialists. It's orcs. Like an orc boy knows what a gun looks like, right? So if he goes to a mech, he's gonna fucking well know if it's not a gun. So when people say, "Oh, orcs could make a pipe with a couple of bullets in, become a gun," that's bullshit. Because any orc worth his salt who goes to a mech with his hard-earned teeth is not going to part money for a fucking tube. He's going to know. He's going to look and go, "That's not a gun. Give me a damn gun or I'll rip your own teeth out and take it to another mech and get a better gun." So that wouldn't work. It's just that kind of idea doesn't make any sense. An orc is going to go, anytime an orc goes to an odd boy, he's going to be worried about being ripped off. So he's going to be very vigilant of a mech trying to pass off an improvement as actually a piece of crap that's just been stuck on that does nothing. Now, he might be able to fool the odd orc with that, and maybe that might have a resonant effect, but it's not going to work with every orc. The key, again, to understanding how resonance works is to look at the average orc. The average orc is not going to be fooled by stuff like that because the average orc is going to know more about firearms than most average human beings, because average human beings aren't born with the genetic knowledge of what a gun is, whereas an orc is. An orc knows this stuff. Now, the thing is that the way that I like to look at it and, make your own euphemisms at home, but resonance is more like a lubricant. it kind of keeps things working when they shouldn't. It's like if you
when it keeps things working when it shouldn't. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Speaks volumes
when,
there,
you
mate.
have to, when you have to force them, you know.
yeah, sometimes you need to spit on it. You know what I mean? But it's like if like you could take any bone in the human body or a muscle, right, and go, right, I found this one muscle or this one bone. Let's take the humerus, right, and every human being alive has had this bone, or at least most of them anyway have had this bone. So therefore,
when I receive a bone, I
everything-
always like it lubricated.
exactly, right.
Boom.
But every
There's
human,
no time for lubricant. There's always time for lubricant.
every human that has that bone who's ever achieved anything has only achieved it because there's a humerus. It's as ridiculous as that. It's like saying that because humans have like hairs on their skin, that everything is achievable. And in a way, yes, that's true. But in a way, no, that's not true. Because there's a lot more going on. Like a mech has inherited genetic knowledge of engineering. Like a mech knows how to build things. A mech doesn't just not care and stick scrap to a vehicle. And I want to take a little moment. We'll probably come into this in more detail in another video. I'm sure we'll cover whether orc vehicles should look rubbish or not as an actual topic. But the thing to remember is that one of the biggest freaking offenders in this mindset comes from the fact that all of the Orc Forge World vehicles look like they're just scrap chucked onto a vehicle. But the unfortunate thing is that's from a lot of that comes from the single Orc book that they made called the Siege of Rax, which was set on a scrap world.
Scrap world, yeah.
So
I think people forget that.
Those vehicles look more rubbish than the average Orc vehicle would look because it's based on a world in which everything was rubbish, literally. So it doesn't help the perception. Whereas we look at the modern buggies, and the singular thing I like about them is that they look more like the old Road Trader stuff that has some aesthetics put into it, because Orcs can do that. Because of course they can. Like, Orcs can put their mind to almost anything and achieve almost anything. They're not a race that doesn't care. It's just they care less because they have absolute confidence.
There's a difference in something looking rubbish because it's made from scrap and it's made from looted parts and it's second-hand parts and it's bits robbed from other vehicles cobbled together. But not rubbish in the sense that it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
The truck, the kit, as we've all gone over before, saying why it's such a great kit is because you could see all the working parts and the axles and everything. You can see it works, but yeah, it still looks like a truck built from scrap parts. It's still cobbled together, and that's a great aesthetic and a lot of the reason that draws a lot of people to Orcs and that. But there's a big difference between that and you open up the hood of the engine and it's just filled with God knows what, and then because the Orcs believe it runs, and they slap some red paint on it and it goes turbo fast. That's going too far. That's going way too far. It still has working parts. It still works.
I think
it still operates. The machinery does still work.
If you look
it
at
might
those
not
kill
be
tanks
finely
from Forge
tuned
World,
like that's been built by some kind of robot or human, and with great measurements and pinpoint accuracy. It is kind of done a little bit more bloke in a shed styly. But yeah, I think sometimes there are truths in a lot of the misconceptions, but they just get taken to extremes. And something's said on like popular videos and stuff, and it kind of becomes the norm, and people take it as
because it's spread, because it's said, because that misconception is said a lot, then it becomes the norm. Then at that point,
those Forge World vehicles you mentioned, though, like the kill tanks, I know are particularly scrappy looking, but you can see the structure of the vehicle underneath it. You can
it still
see
looks like a working vehicle. Looks fucking
solid
cool.
vehicle. Yeah.
I remind everybody who is watching this video who's into 40k that Orcs are still the only faction with a fucking thing that looks like a plane, that is a plane.
Yeah,
all the other flying vehicles don't look like they would fly. Ours do. But we're the
Short,
ones who
stubby
keep getting
wings.
told by
I
lore
was
experts.
about to say, because they're mostly engine. That's why it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, stick enough trust in it, bolt on some weapons, and maybe a wing
And
or
some
two, and away
wings.
she goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like lore experts tell us that our orc planes are basically bricks that just fly because people think they do.
Have you
It's
seen
bullshit.
the Thunderbolt, mate? have you seen some of the Space Marine flyers? Like flying
Yeah.
bricks. Come on, like.
They're
those
probably
are
the best
flying
example
bricks.
of that, aren't they?
Yeah.
The
Space Marine
Valkyrie,
flying
even that's a
vehicles.
bleeding flying brick. That's
Yeah.
literally like a
It
brick with
looks
some
like,
wings.
Looks like a
sticking.
council office block, doesn't it?
There's one faction. There's one faction in 40k that does have a religion about its technology, and it's the Imperials.
Yeah.
They have a religion that is technology. It's entirely religious. They don't know how any of it bloody well works. Mechs know more about how their stuff works than the average freaking admech does. They know far more. And people are like, oh, but orcs are stupid. They don't know how their
But
stuff works.
this is the thing I've always found about people talking about orc technology, how it's stupid and basic and barbaric or whatever, and that other factions are so advanced. Orcs are the masters of teleportation technology.
And force field as well.
And force fields. Like, so many don't realize that.
Mm.
And that's an inherent ability that they have. Like the shock attack one is literally that rips a hole in the warp, transports the snotlings who go bleeding barmy because they go through the warp, and then it opens the rift somewhere. Like nobody else like does that. You know what I mean? No one's capable of it.
Yeah.
You know? You look at the lore for like how
so underrated.
It's
Yeah,
kind
it
of
is.
kind of fitting though, isn't it? It's kind of fitting because
Yeah.
the real life players kind of match the lore in a sense in that way. In
But
that
they underestimate the
orcs
orc.
underestimated, and that is
yeah,
your biggest
so
downfall.
underestimated.
And almost the orcs' biggest strength is that they are so vastly underestimated, and too often not taken as a serious threat until it's too late. And then whole systems are fucking overrun and fucking devastated, and it kind of works for us that other faction players underestimate us because it sort of ties in nicely with the lore, and it's nice on the tabletop as well
it's very
when you win these
fluffy.
games.
Orcs
when
are the best.
you're
Everything else is
underestimated.
propaganda.
I mean, Dim, yourself, you've talked to us about in one of our recent videos. You talked about being underestimated by an opponent. Oh, the grots, they'll be fine. Don't worry about them. Oh, what? What do you mean? And it's
What do you mean the
beautiful 'cause
BS4?
it's like the lore
BS3.
becoming real on the tabletop. It's really cool.
I suppose they are BS4 now, aren't they? Because they changed it because people can't read charts anymore. But
back in my day we had charts.
back in my day. But yeah,
Templates, mate.
I do want to make
I
it clear.
swear
Though,
Dim's got a sign on his fence saying no ball games.
I don't care about stuff like that. But
I miss the dinner plates. You can't see it though because of my green screen, but there is a giant template in my hand.
yeah, I miss
like a
templates. I miss templates as well. Templates were the best thing, and all you freaking idiot bloody tournament players, screw you.
There's that counter going
Game
again.
ain't better.
Tick, 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 tick.
The game ain't better. You
Unsubscribe.
ruined it. Goodbye. Anyway,
Yeah, if you want to know where the bitter edge is between tournament players and other players, that you just hit it right there, innit?
there used to be other people in this
templates.
hobby. Just saying, there used to be, but not
No,
anymore.
there still is. I just think they're not.
There
as
still
well.
is, man.
Well,
There
going
still
back
is.
onto
Go
the
on.
Orky technology and bringing it back on target.
Competitive players aren't all bad.
No. Sometimes they lose. It's great when that happens. No. Seriously.
So talking about
Trying
the
to be mean.
lore
I'm not trying
and
to be
orc
mean.
technology, I think a lot of people need to read some of the. This is why it's a good idea to go back and read some of the older books. They'll talk about how orc wars will start, especially when a space hulk drops into the system and it's seen as an omen to start a war. And the orcs will literally build massive tractor beams and lock onto the space hulk and stop it from moving on. You know, teleport
This is
themselves
very
on.
much,
Probably-
very much Gaz's story, isn't it?
Well,
it happens.
His sort
it's
of
almost
origins.
every orc story. There's a few things that start that escalation. So one of it is population, and it reaches what is often. I used to hate this term because I didn't think it was in the law, but I found it is, unfortunately, a critical mass. It's called a critical mass of orcs, and it will kickstart the next. The orcs have always got ways of escalating their behavior, whether they are fighting each other. And I think a big part of why orcs fight each other is so they can create new stimulus. they're almost forcing themselves to evolve their culture by fighting each other. I think that's entirely the point of clans.
It's kind of the worst thing that can
create
happen to an orc,
enemies
isn't it? Is a no combat situation.
Well, enemies always need
very-
an adversary because that's how they're. Orcs have a culture that's based on reacting, so they have to have something to create culture because they can't bring it from scratch. They need to react to it.
An orc without that violent stimulus and that need to compete and rise up through the pecking order and stuff. It's the worst thing that can happen to an orc.
Yeah,
They
think,
need that. They thrive off that. It's
kind of based in reality, though. If you look at the technology base before any of the the Second World War, especially, like, you know what I mean, or even like the space race, because of that adversarial effect for us. So I reckon that's where that aspect of the lore comes. The difference in technology before and after conflicts, even just through military means, accelerates because you need to.
My painting being a prime example. I've got to finish before them other kids.
I thought Steve O was going to ruin that, but no, this is still a good example. The difference between us and orcs is that orcs always enjoy that process.
They don't stop and question why.
Yeah, they don't worry about it. That's a big part of their religion. Like their lack of doubt makes Gorkamorka almost unassailable. Now, there is also a religious link to the concept of the Waaagh. It's in their myths, like the whole idea. Like there's a myth of like the orc gods decide to go exploring, so Gork throws Mork into the skies, and then jumps off after him. I think, or is it one of them swings their club around until it has enough force to propel them both out of the planet they're in, and off they go. But there's all sorts of myths about orcs, Gorkamorka going on adventures. There's also one where they go into the bottom of like a horrendously huge drops site, which is just a whole load of refuse. It's a channeling what's his face from Jurassic Park. That's a whole lot of shit. Jeff Goldblum, there we go, I got there. And they find at the bottom of the refuse, they find Nurgle as a squig, and they eat him. It's a weird story.
That'll give you a belly ache, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but orcs, for orcs, the Waaagh is very much a religious concept.
Sounds like my local takeaway.
Orcs aren't particularly religious. Well, orcs don't worry about indigestion because they've got 4 stomachs. Well, no, sorry, they've got 2 stomachs and 2 hearts, and the two hearts can also function as stomachs. So orcs can basically eat anything. They're kind of
see
like
the
wombats.
takeaway now. The rotten bottom, Nurgle's finest.
There's a British ale that's called that, and apparently that's exactly what it does to you if you drink too much of it. But yeah,
the rusty ring.
The bishop's
stay on
finger.
target. Stay on target.
Which to our international viewers, bishop's finger, that's real. That exists.
That's a real bit. Yeah. None's delight.
We've got lots of them. They're all
We've got the blue nun, haven't we? Blue nun.
Yeah.
I feel we've gone off topic again.
Yeah, it's almost like I said, stay on target or something. But yeah, so like folks have this.
Oh, it's nice being the disruptive one for a change.
I mean, seriously, come on. I'm gonna get this fucking sentence out. Anyway, so I mean, it is normally my fault.
Now you're wandering. You can't give out to them about wandering off topic, and you just meander yourself. Come on, man. Come on, focus.
Right,
focus.
So orcs have this sort of religious experience, and that is kind of why the Stomper or the Gargant is a totemic object. It's like it's based on Gork or perhaps Mork. And it's the same with the statue of Gorkamorka.
Resonance is the reason that thing's able to move.
No. Although maybe, but probably not. But like the Gorkamorka statue that eventually is going to be like a huge teleporter for the orcs in Gorkamorka. Part of the reason why Gorkamorka goes so badly is because the orcs were on a Waaagh and they end up in a planet with no real opposition. And they are stagnating by this, and they desperately want to get out because they feel like their Waaagh was interrupted. It destroys their culture. So they lose all the clans, which is in the fluff. It's covered in Rogue Trader. You can end
You
up
end up with little boys.
the orcs go into like almost a reset moment, and their entire societal structure just resets, and they just kind of try and figure out where they're going from there. So it's called what's known as a Splinter Clan, where you got the development of a new sort of clan, and it's always orcs in isolation, when orcs have no contact with other orcs from other planets.
Here's a question for you.
The situation is extreme.
We talked about orcs not sort of having a conscious control over the psychic powers and things, like the weird boys and stuff. It kind of spills out in like a random, undetermined fashion. Has there ever been an orc character in official lore that does have some semblance of control and knowledge of sort of said powers and capabilities and potential?
Only in my lore.
So people like old Zogwart and stuff still follow the same principles of, you know,
more or less.
Still kind of
they don't really know.
Yeah,
I
loosen their shit. Yeah.
I think there is. It's not answering your question the way you'd like it to be asked, because I don't think orcs are really that conscious of it. And I think if they were, like, I've got like a bit of a pet theory about this, but basically my perspective is that if orcs have a clear understanding of how resonance works, or at least an aspect of how resonance works, they're mad. So my idea is that orcs would pay a price for that, and that price would be their sanity.
Yeah, but even the knowledge of it would undermine it as an ability or a concept then.
Not necessarily, but it would make it very as unpredictable as resonance is.
Would other orcs reject them as well?
They wouldn't really understand how to manifest it properly, because they'd be mad, so they'd be unpredictable. So the resonance, the effect would be unpredictable in the same. I don't think there's really a way for orcs to properly understand it. I'm sure orcs are partly aware that there's something weird going on, but they just don't care. That's the problem. The problem is, again, you're dealing with orcs who don't have that curiosity, really. I mean, I'm sure there's some odd boys that have probably tried to understand this, but they don't get very far because they get distracted by other things. It's almost a thing that they just take for granted and they just use without really realizing just how much they use it. And I probably should say, I'm not trying to throw cold water on the fact that some orc technology only works because of resonance, because it's inevitable. It's inevitable that some things will need it. Because orcs, this is another aspect in the orc toolkit. So orcs can make technology that works even though it shouldn't. That's the way to look at it. It's not that all orc technology requires it. It's that orcs can use this to make technology that shouldn't work still work. That's the key. That's the difference. And the other thing to bear in mind about that is that, like, where you see resonance at its most powerful is in the realm of madness. It's not covered an awful lot because orcs haven't really. I think this is the first time in a long time that GW's ever mentioned Mad Boys. They're mentioned briefly in Saga of the Beast. They're included as one of the alternate clans that you can take, even though only one of the issues they've got. I think the Moronics. I think they've got one of the classic types of Mad Boy there, but there's a type of Mad Boy in the old lore called the Schizo. I mean, again, some of these names are not particularly PC, so I can see why.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Unlikely to be in new books.
Yeah, but it's a real shame because the thing is that orcs are very disability positive, as we talked about in the Q&A.
Oh, they are. They're very, yeah.
They don't really. They've got issues with Mad Boys, but they appreciate them still, and they always let them join in and fight in their own way. And when that is successful, the orcs are delighted.
Because it's a right laugh.
Yeah, it's really good. But the schizos have this weird thing where if they get particularly disturbed, things start floating around them. That's resonance. When Mad Boys get incredibly angry, they are ridiculously strong. They're probably more strong than other orcs.
Do grots emanate psychic resonance?
Yeah, well, Macquarie is a good suggestion that they do, because Macquarie is very lucky. That's probably resonance in effect. There's not an awful lot of clear cases, because obviously Gretchen being very subservient, Gretchen have to get to a role of being important, and that doesn't happen very often for grots. But I do think they are affected by it. I think the main way they're affected is by things like luck. Because they're regarded as mascots mascots are inherently lucky. That's a big part.
What about
of...
squigs?
Squigs definitely are. All the various squigs shapes and sizes is almost inevitably going to be resonance, because it's the only way it really makes any kind of sense. Because if you think about it, the way that squigs manifest, they're either food or they're useful. And sometimes being useful isn't necessarily better, but it's there. It seems to be some kind of selection going on. And that selection is kind of based on what orcs seem to want to need. And it seems like those things are always in more abundant sort of quantities, the more they're needed. So you could look at something like squigoffs and squigs and boars, who are mentioned as a type of squig, and all these various ones that are very, very useful for like societies that don't have bikes and don't have vehicles, they're there. But as orc society that has bikes or vehicles probably has less squigoffs because they don't need them. The things that seem to be plentiful are things like paint squigs, mending squigs, and hairy squigs, although mending squigs are typically types of hairy squigs, syringe squigs, stuff like that. Or squigs that orcs are impressed by, so stuff like vampire
Lubricant
squigs.
Just to give, just to throw the like scientific like argument to that would be, well, it's just, you know, you could say it's because they are specifically looking for squigs that are paint squigs, so they're picking them ones out and nurturing them ones, and not so much the ones that are going to be something that they don't need so much. So
the problem is they reproduce by sporing, which means that you can't really specifically breed them. But I think that breeding is done via resonance. I think orcs find something that's useful and go, oh, that's useful. So the sporing system produces more of it. And I think that's why. And when orcs aren't thinking about something that isn't useful, that isn't being produced. And I think there's probably some mutation in squigs to arrive at things that are
do you think like the breeders and things probably thinking things like in the same way like the snotlings sort of cultivate the fungus and stuff? Is it kind of like the air, they're kind of probably thinking more it's like the area that they're breeding them in, but because of the psychic resonance and that is having more effect perhaps than
possibly, but they might also be developing them further on. The thing is if you look at the docks, that if you look at like say pig docks or something like that, you're looking at things that sort of like maintain squigoffs and gargantuan squigoffs and squigs and boars and things. And the fact of the matter is that they probably start off a lot smaller and a lot less tough than they end up. And I think there's probably a big element of like the pig docks are more or less training them and keeping them alive more than they are breeding them. They're training them to be more vicious. And then obviously because they're useful to orcs in that way.
That's what I mean. Like the ones that they nurture are the ones that survive because they're the ones that they want. You know, it's like,
yeah.
There's so many of them.
The thing to mention also is that big part of resonance is also empowering orcs biologically and orcoids specifically. So orcs are rewarded biologically for survival and strength and aggression. So the more aggressive an orcoid gets, and it uses the term orcoid in the books, which suggests it's more than just the orcs themselves, but also the squigs, the snotlings, and the grots. Obviously, snotlings are very rarely aggressive, and grots, So it's usually orcs and squigs that manifest this more. But like the whole like the bigger fish thing, I think that's a big part of it. I think like a squigoff that's particularly vicious grows in the same way that an orc that is particularly aggressive grows. I think that's probably the same process. So I think it's likely
that fits nicely.
It also starts in the same way, like they say, like the snake bites, like breed the best squigoffs and stuff. Probably happened because they happen to have a big squigoff, and they gain the reputation of having bigger squigoffs than that because of the psychic resonance. It kind of makes that a reality.
Yeah, they get more bigger squigoffs more frequently. Yes. I think that's true.
I think we've covered everything pretty well, haven't we?
There's a couple. Did I mention Mad Boys? Didn't I? There was one thing I was wanting to mention. Just a little thing on just like this thing about, because it's a very subtle thing. It is always there. Like orcs always have this effect, but the thing to remember is that orcs don't have the imagination for it to do ridiculous things, unless they're Mad Boys, and then they do, right? So the thing to remember about it is that the limitation on it is always the orc imagination. That's the key thing to take away. So an awful lot of the very fanciful nonsense that the non-orc players go on about would never happen because orcs are too rational for that. But orcs aren't too rational that they're not capable of being irrational, so that you get some crazy stuff, like red ones go faster, like blue ones being lucky, like, you know, squigs grow to be squig-offs and all this various stuff and all the various sort of useful.
And you do
things.
get orcs with huge ambition, don't you? And
From
sort
time
of
to time,
ideas of grandeur. You get like
most boys aren't
big mechs
ambitious.
that want to lead the biggest dread mob, the big mechs that want to build the biggest gargant that's ever been seen, and you know,
and they get rewarded.
The breeders that want to breed the biggest squig-offs,
but they're being aggressive, so they get rewarded through the resonant field. That's how it works.
Must have been a mad boy that come up with the squig pipes.
Must have been. But again, like it's like orcs like making loud noises, and orcs like loud noises. So a squig that makes itself the orc that happens to that ends up being like a useful instrument. You know, that it survives. It doesn't get eaten. Most squigs in orc society are food. So it benefits some squigs to be a little different, even if some of them are, if you think about it for any length of time, quite ridiculously disgusting. And I thought it might be fun to mention that one. So the interesting thing about orcs is that they have an awful lot of paint. And that paint is produced by paint squigs. And a paint squig is a weird looking thing. It kind of looks a bit like a slug. It's a variant of a hair squig because it produces hair. And orcs like hairy squigs. And they come in various shapes and sizes. And you'll end up with a squig, a variant of hair squig that starts to produce something quite useful. And the disgusting word to bear in mind is anal secretions, because that is what the paint is.
It's the word of the day, kids.
So
anal secretion.
I imagine that anything that is painted by orcs probably stinks. And I don't know how orcs put up with it, because they've got a very heightened sense of smell.
That's interesting, though. That means that each color has its own specific smell, most likely.
But
this smells blue, that smells red.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's an interesting thought. Yeah, and orcs detect an awful lot about their society through smell. They're aware of, like, because spores have their own scent, so orcs are aware when they're surrounded by orcs of a higher status. Like,
does blue smell lucky only because the squigs that produce blue paint eat well?
Maybe.
Depends what they're feeding on, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But the important thing to remember is that orcs will never make a brick fly unless they're a schizo, then they might. But not when you want them to. Only when you don't want them to. Only when the schizo has that particularly worrying fantasy. And they probably have an awfully large amount of them. But yeah.
Flying
Waaagh
brick
Energy.
fantasies, love it. I mean, orcs could make a brick fly, but you know, they'd see, like, they'd stick engines to it and hollow this out, and you know, we're talking about the race that literally hollows out asteroids and uses them as fucking, you know, defensive posts or, you know, means of attacking. The stuff that orcs can do is impressive.
Yeah, that's another thing to bear in mind, actually, because like when people say, "Oh, like orc gun, like it's just a tube that fires bullets," like it's never going to be just a tube. Like orcs don't do things by halves. Have you read anything to do with orcs? Orcs dial it up to fucking 11. It's not going to be one tube. It's going to be 4 tubes. All
if anything, they're probably over-engineered.
Powered by a warp generator with different kinds of projectile, one of which is chipmunks and very, very vicious squig chipmunks. And it's, you know, it'll have several backup charges and like a crank trigger and and it's going to have a bunch of extra things. It's going to have 4 different kinds of sight, and it's also going to have a flamethrower on it because, of course, it does. It's cool, right? That's how orc technology is. Orcs don't start with a bare minimum and go, "That's enough."
We call it the ZF1.
No mech ever thinks like that. No orc ever thinks like that. Orcs want more always. They're not minimalists. So you're never going to get any stupid minimalist design like that. It makes no sense. When you factor in how orcs think, resonance becomes pretty straightforward. but also has infinite possibilities because that's how it works. Right, I'm going to shut up now. Much to their delight.
You've summarised it nicely, mate. There you go.
Oh shit, I'm the host. I can't shut up.
So hopefully, obviously we're still recording this at the moment. So hopefully at the time of watching this, you can hear us all.
Yeah.
We do apologise for the last one. Dim's been getting some serious flack on the editing side, but I've got to stand up for Dim here. It's just kind of thing that happened. It wasn't the fault of the editing process.
It's like there's only so much polishing you can do to a turd, but it's still a turd. Like.
And Dim polished that turd within an inch of his life.
He spent 3 days really hard working on it.
I spent 5 hours just editing the audio.
So
and
hopefully,
still terrible.
Fair play
this
to
time,
Dim.
you're hearing us all crystal clear. We've got 3 of us recording this.
3
just in
backups.
case. we got backups and we got backups to backups. So hopefully you are seeing us in crisp detail, hearing us clearly. And
next time you see Dread, I might not have these borders in the way anymore. The PC is almost done.
Yeah.
But believe the borders will be gone and they'll go, mate. There you go. Which contradicts everything I was just saying.
Bigger,
for the
So yeah, speaking of the interesting things that happened in October, next episode, we are going to talk about what happened in October. We're going to do an October wrap-up episode where we talk about what happened in October, what cool stuff came out, the fact that GW did nothing again.
I was about to say, we're going to cover all of the big GW releases for October and
no,
do the reviews and
we're going to talk about what everybody else did, you know, when they got their act together and did.
What you're saying is October just Orc player resonance, or is it an actual thing?
That's a good question. And
it's a nice segue. That's a lovely segue.
I love that. Yeah. He is Mr. Segway. He's bloody good at segues, isn't he? Yeah.
And at some point, maybe before this video, maybe you've already seen it, or it'll probably be after this video, we're going to be doing the Gear Guts unboxing and taking a look there as a bonus episode. But me and Dread are still waiting on our packages.
We're waiting on packages. So if we get them before that, you will see that episode before this. And if you haven't seen it before, yes, it's still coming.
We're working on breeding some postal squigs. So
and just because obviously we mucked up the Q&A a bit. I'm going through the Q&A, not as we speak, but almost as we speak, figuring out what questions we answered and what questions we didn't. During the unboxing, we'll do the unboxing, we'll show what we got, we'll have a talk about it for a little bit, and then we are going to do the remaining Q&A questions again. And we're going to film them and we're going to answer them. And there's going to be decent
with more vim and vigor
audio this time.
It won't make your ears bleed this time round.
Yeah, so we're gonna do it again, just so we've covered everything. But yeah, and hopefully you'll hear a whole lot less of me.
Hey, look, who knows? When they hear us lot talking, they might wish for the fucking audio to fuck up again.
There's a few viewers down there. It's like, I really like that version. It's great. Dim's mum.
Yeah, as always, guys, get in the comments section. Share your thoughts on psychic resonance and Orc psychers and all of that good stuff. And we'd love to interact with you and see your comments and stuff, and see if anyone in there can trigger Dim. It shouldn't be difficult.
I'm presenting all my vulnerabilities to you now. This is.
Well, like we're his mates and we trigger him on a daily basis.
It's very easy. It's very easy.
That's why anxiety is at its maximum peak at the moment, because we're up to the internet.
Come equipped with an oil squig to make it easier for him.
Yeah. Do you know how they tend to farm those? Because they could just squeeze them, but the Orcs don't think that's fun enough. So what they do is they put a bunch of them in a barrel, give Gretchen some metal boots, and then they chuck a grot in to stamp on them and burst them. It's a renewable source of oil, and they just think it's more fun to burst them whilst watching the grot hilariously fall around in this ton of oil that they are further wasting by covering a grot in it. Orcs in a nutshell. It's great. So, Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Warbosses of the Apocalypse, if we can call it that. And it's bye from Dim, the hobby gate.
6 plus
Enough.
Stevo signing out.
Enough said from Dread.
Don't forget to drill your barrels from Scar. Take it easy.
Way.
Good one.
Oh, kill me.
We can't hear it.
There you go. Right. Happy days.
Everybody ready?
Are you ready to Warboss it?
No, I'm never ready because I'm hosting. Right, okay.
Greetings, boys and girls.
Yeah, no. I'm doing that again. Just try and act like you're surprised.
Dim, for your intro, just to not get it wrong, you should just go, hello. I'm Dim, and these guys are.
And together we form the Warbosses.
I fucking knew that cunt was going to interrupt. I was just about to say. Just you fucking piece of shit. Oh god. Oh dear. Right. Okay.
Here he goes.
Oh right. Okay.
Could get some of that out of your system before
Yeah.
it's there.
Okay. Keep some in the system. It's handy.
Yeah, careful, Dim, because you're going to make it look like we're really unprofessional or something.
Yeah. Well, we are.
We'd hate them to think that.
Hey guys. Greetings, boys and gits, and don't forget to drill your barrels. Oh fuck! I ruined that.
Oh, copyright infringement, motherfucker.
No, yeah.
Well, I'm fucking sticking with it because I fucking ruined it last week. Hey guys, don't forget to drill your barrels. Oh, for fuck's sake.
Greetings, boys and girls.
Greeting. Bleh.